They say the desert don't keep secrets, but I did. Name's Josiah McCall, though folks in these parts call me Dusty. Guess that's fair. I've been hiding out in this godforsaken stretch past the Rio Grande long enough to gather dust, like a tombstone. My only companions were a half-broke Marais, a rifle I never fired unless I had to, and a stack of sins I kept stacked higher than my firewood. I was a rustler once. Not proud of it, not ashamed either, just the truth. I stole cattle from men who had more than they needed and less than they deserved. Never got caught, never left a trail. Until one evening when I spotted a trail I hadn't made. Fresh hoof prints. Too fresh. The tracks curved behind the ridge near the dry creek bed, straight to the cache, where I kept the herd I'd been moving at night. My heart sank. Either someone was tracking me or someone knew, and then I saw him. Silas. He looked like a ghost in the dying light, barely more than a kid. Dust on his boots, sweat matting his hair, and eyes like a man who'd seen too much and learned too little. "My brother, Dusty," he said, out of breath. "I didn't know you'd be back so soon." I stared at him. "You followed me?" He looked down. I didn't take much. Just 3 head. Thought you wouldn't notice." My chest went tight. Silas was barely 20, and already walking the same trail I had. Worse, he looked up to me like I was some outlaw saint. He'd seen me ride off at 17, disappear across state lines, and come back with money I didn't explain and scars I didn't name. "Silas," I said slowly, voice like gravel, "do you understand what happens if someone catches you?" "With that cattle?" He swallowed. "I wasn't gonna sell and just move 'em further east. Maybe trade with that drunkard Jeb. He don't ask questions." I looked away, fists clenched. He was just a boy, my boy, in some ways. Our pay died when Silas was 10, and I'd been more father than brother since. Mama worked her hands raw, trying to keep us fed, and when that failed, I stole enough to make it look like we were lucky. Now, I was watching the result of that luck come back like a loaded gun aimed at my chest. "You're done," I said. "You hear me? We're gonna return what you took tonight. Quiet. You never touch another branded hide again." He looked up, shame burning in his face. "You won't tell, Ma?" I sighed. "Not if you swear to me, Silas," he nodded. "I swear." So we saddled up and rode under moonlight, every hoofbeat thudding like guilt in my ears. We made it look like the herd got spooked and circled back, just like I'd done a dozen times. No one would know, or so I thought, but the moment I covered for him, I knew something had shifted. This wasn't just my secret anymore, it was ours. At first light, I saddled my Marais and rode toward town like a man with nothing to hide. That was the trick. See ride steady, breathe slow, and never look back. But Silas trailed me like a guilty shadow, his nerves twitching with every distant crow call. He wasn't built for lying. Not like I was. "Stay calm," I told him as we crossed the dusty mesa. "Just nod and smile." "Dusty," he muttered. "What if they already know?" "They don't. Trust me." Truth was, I didn't know either. But I'd lived by one rule. The moment you flinch, they know you're guilty. When we rolled into town, the usual chatter of porch talk and boot steps on plank boardwalks filled the air. The sheriff stood outside his office, arms crossed, sipping from a tin cup like he owned the sun. Sheriff Ezra Harper was a hawk of a man, lean, gray, and mean-eyed. Used to be, he was my hero. Now he was the one man I feared more than hell. He spotted us. "Mornin', boys," I nodded, tipping my hat. "Mornin', Sheriff." Silas mumbled a greeting, eyes low. Ezra squinted at us. "You two been up early." Ain't many ride out from the canyon this time of day. Just checking the old creek line, I said easily. Looked like the ground shifted after the last storm. The sheriff didn't blink. That so? I kept my hands loose on the reins. Heard you lost a few head from the Turner Ranch. Wolves again? Ezra took a step forward. Funny thing. Tracks say otherwise. Clean cuts on the fence wire. No blood. Silas flinched. I felt it more than saw it. Could have been wild dogs, I offered. Or someone else's rustlers moving. Through. The sheriff took a long sip. Maybe, or maybe it's someone closer to home. A silence settled so thick you could stir it with a stick. Then Ezra's eyes moved to Silas. You doing all right, son? Silas forced a smile that barely held together. Yes, sir. Ezra nodded slow, like a man marking a name in his mind. Good, 'cause I'd hate to think the McCall boys were turning back to bad habits. My teeth clenched. I wanted to snap. Right there, but I didn't. Instead, I gave him a look I'd mastered over the years. Calm, confident, innocent. We're just ranch folks, Sheriff. Always have been. He didn't reply. Just turned and walked back toward his office. As soon as we were clear, Silas let out a shaky breath. He knows, Dusty. No, he suspects, I said. And suspicion don't stick unless we give him reason. Silas looked back toward the sheriff's door, doubt in his eyes. What if I already did? I didn't answer. My gut was already churning. We just danced with fire, and I'd lied without flinching. For him. That night I sat alone under the stars, chewing dried jerky, staring into the flame. Silas was inside, pretending to sleep. My hands shook. I told myself it was the cold, but it wasn't. It was guilt. Because when I looked at my brother, I saw what I'd built. A boy who thought lies were love. A boy who thought I was worth imitating. And if Ezra Harper was half the lawman I remembered, he'd be coming again. Soon. I woke to the sound of hooves far off, fast and fading. My first thought was raiders. My second was worse. I rushed outside, half-dressed, rifle in hand. The corral was empty. All but 3 of the branded steers were gone. I didn't need a trail map to know who did it. I found him near dusk, half a canyon away, herding cattle like he knew what the hell he was doing. He didn't. The herd was sloppy, scattered. One calf limped, likely from a rushed drive. And there was Silas, hollering and waving his arms like some damn fool outlaw in a dime novel. When he saw me ride up, he had the gall to grin. Dusty. I was just, you broke your word. His grin died. I needed more trade. That old. Drunk Jeb offered me cartridges for 3 heads, said he'd toss in jerky and a bottle of bourbon. You think bullets and whiskey are worth risking jail? I snapped. Or worse. He stiffened. You do it? I blinked. Wanted. You say? You do it, Deasty. Don't pretend you ain't out here for the same reason. You just think you're smarter than me. His voice cracked then, not from anger but from shame. I'm tired of watching you act like you ain't got blood on your hands. Tired of hiding. You left me and Ma for years, and now you think you can ride in and tell me how to live? I stared at him, breath heavy. Somewhere behind the anger, I knew he was right. I'd carved a path in the dark and left breadcrumbs for him to follow. Now he was standing in the mess I made, wearing my sins like hand-me-down boots. Still, I couldn't. Let this go. We're hiding the herd, I said. Deeper this time, West Ridge under the Black Mesa. He blinked. You're not turning me in? No, I said bitterly. I'm helping you, again. We worked through the night. Moved the herd slowly, carefully. No campfires, no talk. Just a low moan of cattle and a creak of leather. The moon cast long shadows over the canyon. like the land itself was judging us. When we finally collapsed in the dust, hours before dawn, Silas leaned back against a rock and stared at the stars. "I miss Ma," he whispered. "Before she got so tired, before Pay died," I swallowed hard. "So do I." "You think she'd forgive us?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I could forgive myself. I stared at my little brother, skinny, sunburnt, trying so damn hard to be a man, and all I'd done was teach him to lie, to steal, to survive at the cost of his soul. I lit a cigarette with shaking fingers, staring off toward the ridgeline. "We can't keep doing this," I muttered. "Next time we might not walk away." Silas didn't respond. He just stared at the horizon. And somewhere deep down, I think we both knew there would be a next time. The night air was thick with silence, broken only by the soft grunts of cattle settling among the shadows. We'd stashed the herd under the black mesa, just like I said, hidden from prying eyes. Or so I hoped. Silas was dozing beside the fireless pit, his hat pulled low. I sat a few feet away, back against a cold boulder, watching the stars tremble above. That unease in my chest, it wasn't fear. It was a premonition. Then I heard it. HOOFBEATS. At first, faint, then louder. Many horses, organized, too quiet for cowboys, too direct for drunks. Deputies. I stood, motioning to Silas. "Get up." He blinked, groggy. "What now?" Before he could ask again, they came. From both ends of the canyon, 6 riders fanned out, rifles drawn. Lanterns swayed on saddle horns, casting sharp glows over rock walls. The badge on the lead man's chest caught the light like a knife edge. "Sheriff Harper." "Drop the rifle, Dusty," he barked. "Don't make this worse than it already is." Silas shot up, frozen. I stepped in front of him. "Sheriff," I said, hands raised. "Ain't no need for blood tonight?" Ezra's eyes narrowed. "Caught red-handed, and you're still talking? Thought you were smarter than that." Silas made a sudden move back toward the rocks, like maybe he could run. I reached out and grabbed his arm. "Don't," I whispered. But then came a sharp whistle from one of the deputies. That one spooked. They shifted in their saddles, rifles rising. I had to think fast. "Go." I hissed and shoved Silas hard toward the right-hand ridge trail. He stumbled, then bolted. The world exploded. A deputy shouted, and 3 shots cracked through the canyon like thunder. One bullet chipped the stone above my head. Another hit a cow, sending it into a panicked charge. I dropped low and fired once, aiming high, just to distract. "Cease fire." Ezra roared. "You'll hit each other." In the confusion, Silas disappeared into the dark. I threw my rifle to the dirt and raised both hands again. "He's gone. You've got me." Ezra's horse stepped forward. The sheriff's face was hard as bone, the old lines etched deeper than I remembered. "You covered for him? Twice." I didn't answer. "Why?" he asked. Looked up. "Because he's all I've got left." The deputies bound my wrists tight enough to burn. My fingers went numb. Blood trickled down my knuckles, mixing with the red canyon dust. They led me to a horse and hoisted me into the saddle. Ezra rode beside me in silence, lantern swinging from his saddle horn. As we left the canyon, I glanced back once. The herd was scattered, spooked, useless now. So was I. And somewhere out there, Silas was running, with every bad lesson I ever taught him wrapped around his neck like a noose. Dawn cracked open the horizon like a raw egg, bleeding gold across the desert. I sat slumped in the saddle, wrists bound with rawhide. Wrists already rubbed raw. Silas was gone, and I was headed for jail. Fair trade, I told myself, but that didn't Stopped the ache in my chest. We reached town just as the sun kissed the church steeple. Folks stopped what they were doing, shopkeepers, blacksmiths, even children watching, as Sheriff Harper led me down Main Street like a parade of shame. Eyes followed. Mouths whispered. I didn't lift my head. They remembered me, all right. Dusty McCall, back from wherever I'd been, now branded an outlaw in full view. The cell was colder than I remembered. Sheriff Harper tossed me in without a word. The door clanged shut, steel on steel, like judgment itself. I sat on the splintered bench, staring at the wall. The silence pressed in on me, thick as Texas heat. I didn't beg, didn't curse. What was the point? Hours passed. Then, boots on the floorboards. The sheriff returned, a folded paper in hand. "Got a letter for you," he muttered, sliding it through the bars. I caught it, already knowing the handwriting before I opened it. Her words were shaky. The ink faded, like her hands had trembled writing every word. "My Dusty, I ain't mad. Just tired. Tired of burying hope. When your P died, I thought you'd carry us. I didn't know it meant carrying lies, too. I sold your father's land to keep Silas fed. That boy never stopped asking where you'd gone. I told him you'd write. You never did." My hands trembled. "Now he's followed your trail. But you're still his hero, Dusty. You always were. Even now, if you've still got any good left in you, give it to him. You gave me years of silence. Give him something better." Mathy words hit harder than any judge's gavel. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. When the sheriff returned again, I didn't look up. "I'll confess," I said. "Everything. The cattle, the lies, all of it." He leaned on the bars. "You protecting that boy again?" I met his eyes. "I'm not protecting him. I'm atoning." He gave a slow nod, the kind you give when a man surprises you. I spent the next few days writing letters to Ma, to the judge, and one to Silas. I didn't know where he was, but I figured word would reach him. I didn't sugarcoat a thing. I told him I was guilty, that I lied, that I'd taught him wrong. But I ended it with a vow. "No more secrets, Silas. If you ever come back, we face the truth together. Or not at all. Then I waited, not for freedom, but for peace." The days in jail crawled by like wounded snakes. I counted sunbeams on the floor and listened to the wind rattle the shutters. Every creak of the sheriff's boots felt like a judgment. Every night I lay on that hard bench and replayed the same scenes. Silas running, my hands bound. Mama's letter pressed against my chest like a prayer and a curse. Then, one morning, something changed. The deputy unlocked the door and handed me another envelope, this one smudged with dirt, edges torn, folded too many times. My name was scribbled across the front, almost like the writer had hesitated before finishing it. It was from Silas. I tore it open, fingers trembling worse than I cared to admit. "Dusty, I'm sorry. I don't know where I am anymore. Rode east. Traded the last steer for a mule and a bedroll. I've been sleeping under stars and hiding from shadows that ain't there. I read Ma's letter, too. Took me days to stop crying. She sold the land for me? I thought you left 'cause you didn't care. I didn't know it was to keep me fed. You lied, but you were trying to be Pa. Maybe that's the worst part, you did it alone." His words scraped the inside of me like splinters under skin. "I don't know how to fix any of this, but I'm tired of hiding. I want to come back. I want to tell the truth, too, even if it means wearing chains for a while. I ain't asking you to forgive me. Just wait for me. I'll come back, I swear." Your brother, Silas I, read it 3 times before folding it up and sliding it inside Ma's. First letter. Together they felt heavier, like a promise weighted with blood and sorrow. That night, I sat by the bars and watched the oil lamp flicker on the sheriff's desk. "Ezra," I said. He looked up, surprised I used his name. "If Silas shows up, don't shoot first." He raised an eyebrow. "Expecting a reunion?" I nodded. "Expecting the truth." He leaned back in his chair. "Truth's a hard horse to break." "Yeah," I said, "but it's the only one worth riding." The next morning I asked for pen and paper again. I wrote Silas one last time. "When you come back, we walk in together. I'll take the blame I earned. But after that, you tell the judge your side. No more shadows. No more running dot, and then I waited dot again, dot. But this time, I wasn't waiting for peace. I was waiting for redemption, however. Long it took to arrive. It was nearly a month before he came back. One morning the deputy burst in, breathless. "McCall," he panted, "your brother, he's here." I stood so fast I nearly knocked over the stool. Sheriff Harper met me outside the cell, silent, as always. But his eyes told me everything. He wasn't expecting this either. Silas stood in the doorway of the jail, hat in hand, looking like hell. He was thinner, sunburnt, a fresh scar on his jaw. His clothes were torn in places, boots caked with dust, but he was here. That's all I cared about. He stepped forward without a word and wrapped his arms around me through the bars. I felt his ribs against mine. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered. "I wasn't sure you would," I replied, barely holding it together. The sheriff gave us a moment, then cleared his throat. "If you're done hugging, we've got business." An hour later, we stood before the county judge in the small courthouse. The place smelled of sweat and cedarwood. A few townsfolk sat in the back, pretending not to stare. Silas shifted beside me, hands clenched. The judge, a broad-bellied man with a mustache like a broom, adjusted his glasses. "Josiah McCall," he said, "you've admitted to rustling, obstructing justice, and lying to an officer of the law." "I have." "And you, Silas," the judge continued, "stand accused of the same. But you've come willingly. Is that correct?" Silas nodded. "Yes, sir." Sheriff Harper stepped forward then, clearing his throat. "I might have something," he said. "There's been rumors about a rustling ring run out of Bitter Creek, bigger than just the McCall boys. Names we can't prove. If Silas here testifies, we might put a few real devils behind bars." The judge eyed Silas. "You willing to name?" "Names, son?" Silas looked at me, then at the judge. "I didn't come back to save myself," he said. "But if telling the truth helps stop all this from happening to someone else, yeah, I'll testify." The courtroom went still. The judge leaned back, stroking his mustache. "In exchange for testimony, I'm willing to reduce Josiah's sentence to time served. But you, Silas, you'll serve 30 days in county jail." "That sit right with both of you?" Silas nodded. "Yes, sir." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. The gavel came down with a crack. We were led outside into the open sun. Silas would serve his month. I was free. Sheriff Harper stepped up beside me as we watched Silas being led to the holding cell. "You did right, Dusty," he said quietly. "Took you long enough?" I didn't answer. Just stared at the door where Silas disappeared. It wasn't over. But for the first time in years, we'd stopped lying. The morning they let Silas out, I was already waiting. I leaned against a fence post near our old corral, same one Pa built before the fever took him. My boots were cleaner now. My heart wasn't, but I stood tall, hands tucked into the pockets of a shirt that still smelled faintly of cedar and trail dust. Silas stepped out, blinking into the sun, thinner than I remembered, but steadier too. He didn't look at me right away, just walked across the yard until he stopped 2 feet away, holding a small bundle in his hand. "Ma's letter," he said, handing it over. "It tore on the way back. Wind caught it." I took it carefully, fingers grazing the worn paper. Inside, folded into the crease, was something I hadn't seen since we were boys. A ring, thin, silver, barely more than a loop of metal. Pause. "I traded what was left of the inheritance," Silas said, eyes wet but proud. "Found a silversmith down near San Pedro. Said he could melt down what Ma got for the land. I didn't want that money hanging over us like a curse." I stared at the ring. "Why this?" "Because it's not for the past. It's for now," he said. "For not running no more. For not lying for us." I slid the ring onto my finger, the metal cool against my skin. It didn't shine. It didn't need to. We stood there for a long while, 2 broken pieces of a family that hadn't had much to begin with, both trying to find a way forward. No cattle, no schemes. Just us. Silas glanced at the corral. "Think we could still raise something? Chickens, maybe? Goats if we're feeling bold." I laughed real and deep for the first time in years. "I reckon we could try." He nodded, then turned to go inside. I stayed behind, looking down at the torn letter and the dust under my boots. Truth be told, I'd always thought redemption would feel cleaner, like a wash in river water or a Sunday sermon. But it didn't. It felt like splinters under skin, like tears you're too proud to cry, like a rusty ring pressed into your palm with more weight than gold ever carried. But it also felt like peace. And for the first time since I rode west with stolen cattle and a heart full of reasons, I knew this. We weren't going to run anymore. We were going to stand together.